Thank you very much. In this segment, we are going to talk about prayer. Prayer has always been a great mystery for me. But the biggest question in theology, I'm sure of this, the biggest question is, does God interact with us? If I pray to God, will God talk back to me? This is the whole difference between theism and deism. And as notable a man as Thomas Jefferson waffled between these two. And there was one point in his life at which he was a deist and cut with a razor blade out of his Bible all the parts where God interacted with us. And some very good theologians, like Rudolf Bultmann, believe that God does not interact with us. God does not interact with us. I think in the movie Oh God, where God goes off to play with the animals, he said you have natural laws. That's the theology of deism. Now, I am a theist, and I'm sure you are too, believing that God interacts with us. And so the real question in our lives is, do we really want God in our lives? Or do we want to go into the God store and buy $2.95 worth of God? But not everything. And this is a real problem, of course. But I have to tell you about why I believe in theism, why I believe that God does interact. When I was a young boy, just going off to the Jesuit novitiate, I went across the street to say goodbye to the man who lived across the street. He had more money than we did, so he bought us footballs and roller skates and things like this. So I wanted to thank him, and I went over to say goodbye to him, and he said, "You're going away to college, are you?" And I said, "Well, it's like a college. It's a seminary." And a stricken look crossed his face. "Oh, you're not going to be a priest." And I said, "Yeah, I hope we give it a shot anyway." "Why do you react that way?" And he said, "Because there is no God. There is no God." He said, "You'll be pouring your life down a futile drain if you go off and give your life to a supposed God." And he said, "Now, I was raised in another Protestant faith, but he said, I know more about the Bible than you do." And I think he did too, by the way. But he said, "But I had a son, a medical doctor, and everybody knew that he was drafted into the Army in the Second World War and came back a broken person. His hands trembled, his hair was white, and he couldn't practice medicine." And he said, "There cannot be a God who presides over a world in which there is war." Now, really, I did not believe him. I did not believe him at all. And when I was crossing the street, I thought, isn't that strange? Such a good man does not believe in God. Until I got into the Jesuit novitiate. And to say that it was Spartan in those days was an understatement. It was awful. They got us up at 5 in the morning. They rang a big bell, and we were supposed to jump out of bed shouting, "Deo gratias, thanks be to God." And for the first week, I'm pretty sure I said, "E pluribus unum." Will that do? Because that's about the only Latin I knew. We talked Latin all day. We knelt on wooden blocks for 3 hours a day praying, you know. And what really bothered me was the Quakers and the Shakers in the Jesuit novitiate. They prayed like this. And I would look at them and say, "Whoa, you guys must know something I don't know. You're getting through, aren't you?" Because it was a wilderness for me. When the Master of Novices asked me if I had any trouble with sleep in the morning meditation, I said, "No, I go right off every morning." And he didn't think that was too funny. And we talked Latin all day. We called each other carissime, which is translated dearly beloved. So and we wore long black skirts called cassocks. Oh, it was really Spartan. One of the novices went in to have his eyes checked in Cincinnati. And he got on the bus and he said to the driver, "What's the fare?" And the driver told him 50 cents. He said, "Oh gosh," he said, "you know, when I was in the world, it was only a quarter." And the bus driver looked at him and said, "Where do you think you are?" Because the Master of Novices told us we're no longer in the world. We're called out of the world. We believed it. And one day I'm walking along in the corridor in my long black skirt, salving the carissime, and I thought, what if Mr. So-and-so was right? What if there is no God? And then I thought, I bet it was Peter, who after the death of Jesus said, "Hey, men, fasten your seatbelts and just listen, okay? What if we say, he rose from the dead?" Wouldn't you rather follow a risen leader than a dead rabbi? Oh, yeah. And we spread the rumor, and Mrs. Goldfarb, she's great at rumors. I saw him too. I saw him with my own eyes. And then 30 years from now, we can put it in print. It'll keep us in business, keep Jesus alive. What do you think? I worked all this out in my own mind, how Peter hoaxed us. And I went to the novices' chapel, which was a small chapel on the 3rd floor, and I said, Mayday, this is Mayday. I mean, this ship is going down. You better, if you have something to say to me, you better say it now and say it loud, please. And nothing happened. And so, believe it or not, I went down to the community chapel on the 1st floor. It was bigger. I thought you'd get better service. Honestly, and I said the same prayer. This is Mayday. I mean, this is serious stuff. And nothing happened. So I remember going with sweaty hands to the Master of Novices. He was the only person we could really talk to about our inner lives. And I was going to tell him, and I did tell him, Father, I don't think I believe in God. And he had been trained in the Carl Rogers School of Counseling. You have to have new ball bearings put in your neck every Christmas. And I said, no, Father, apparently you didn't hear what I just said. I think I am an atheist. He, And he told me to be patient. Instead of sending me home, he told me to be patient. I got out of his office, and I thought, yes. I said, sure. And I thought, what are you patient for? I couldn't imagine. And the Master of Novices told us that when we made the act of presence at the beginning of prayer, that God is always looking down at us and always smiling at us. But we rarely raise our minds and hearts to God. When we do, we look up, we see that like a little baby in its mother's or father's arms. You know that you're being protected. You know you're loved. And just feel so secure. Well, all I ever saw was the ceiling when I looked up. And so I was pretty sure I was an atheist, and I was pretty sure my days were limited. And one night, we were supposed to make this act of the presence before our final nightly prayers, and I got out in the corridor of the novitiate, or out in the aisle of the novitiate, after putting my wooden block in place by my desk, and God touched me. I was sure God was with me. I was sure God was inside me. You can debate my sanity later. I know this was true. I know that God touched me. And I remember I started to cry, and the novice behind me came up and looked up in my face and said, "Are you homesick?" And I said, no, I'm all right. But what I do remember was that I thought, if this is happiness, I've never been happy before. I mean, this is a taste of new wine. And I must admit that Copernican moment in my life transformed the Jesuit novitiate into a heaven on earth. Nothing was hard after that. It was really all just very easy. That, when you touched my heart and I ran the way of your commandments, everything was easy. I remember going back to the Master of Novices saying, "Guess what?" He said, And he took down a book on prayer, and he told me to read the 7th chapter, which was entitled The Touch of God. And I thought, yes. So I do believe in a God who interacts. I do believe in a God who answers our prayers. I do believe in this God. And I'm always anxious to see it confirmed that other people have that same experience. And I ask myself, why don't we? Why don't other people have it? And I saw a movie recently called My Name is Bill W. It's on the Alcoholics Anonymous movement. And Bill Wilson was a hopeless alcoholic. He was one of the co-founders with Dr. Bob Moore of Akron, Ohio. He was a hopeless alcoholic, and his Dr. Silkworth told him, "Bill, you're hopeless. There's nothing I can do for you." And he said, "Well, is there anything I can do?" And he said, Carl Jung over in Geneva, Switzerland, the great psychiatrist, says, a religious experience. So Bill Wilson said to God, "I don't even know if I believe in you, but if you're there, please help me." And he never had another drink after that. And if you saw the movie, it was recently on television, Bill Wilson says, the experience is gone, but the peace remains. The strength remains. And you never have to convince anyone from Alcoholics Anonymous who is a recovering alcoholic, or in any of the 12-step programs, the Overeaters Anonymous, the Emotions Anonymous, and so forth. You never have to convince any of them that there is a God. because the higher power of God has entered those lives and helped them to do something that they knew they were powerless to do. So it's really important, I think, to know this, that God does answer prayers. God does come to us. There's a lady named, well, I won't tell you her name, but she edits a magazine in Illinois, north of Chicago, called Witness. And she got one of her parishioners to write this story, and the lady put her name down, so I know the lady's name. But she said she was a poor little girl in Chicago. She lived in a cold water apartment, and I didn't even know what a cold water apartment meant. But there's no cold water, there's no hot water, you know. You want hot water, you put the water on the stove. And she met a boy who fell in love with her. And he invited her to marry him. And she thought, why would he want to marry a kid like myself? But she married John. And they moved up to a suburb of Chicago where she said, I had a lawn, I had a garden, and hot water. And I also started having children. I thought, my cup is running over. I have everything I've ever wanted in life. And she began to feel sick. And she said, the doctor put her in the hospital. And one night he came into her room and he said, your liver has stopped working. Now, we don't know why it stopped, and we don't know how to start it up again. And she sat up in bed, and she said, I was very weak. And she said, wait a minute now. You are telling me that I am dying, aren't you? And he said, we've done all we can. We just don't know anymore. So she said, I want to tell God off. So I felt my way along the corridor because I was so weak. And I got down to the chapel. And I was going up the aisle, and I was going to say to God, you are a phony God. You passed yourself off as love. And every time anyone gets happy, you pull the rug out from under them. For the first time in my life, I was happy, and now I'm dying. You're taking life itself away from me. And she said, I was about to tell God off when I fell. She fell in the center aisle of the chapel, and there's no one else there. And all I could read, she said, were the words that were stenciled in the carpet along the entrance to the sanctuary. Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner. And she said, this is all I could say. I could keep repeating, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner. And she said, I know that God spoke to me that night. And what God said was, you know what this is all about, Jane? You've never really turned your life over to me. You never really have done that. I'm sorry that I had to bring you to death's door to get you to do that. But that's what it's all about. These doctors will treat you, but I'm the only one that can cure you. And so she said, there in the dark chapel, with my head over my crossed arms, I made my act of surrender. And she said, I felt my way back to my hospital bed, and the doctor came in the next morning, and he took the urinalyses and the blood tests, and he came back and he said, your liver has started working again. We don't know why it started. And she said, so I'm out of the hospital now, and I'm well again. I'm raising my children. And the doctors remain mystified. They don't know why the liver stopped. They don't know why it started. But God and I know. And I think this is true, that one of the preludes to prayer is this absolute surrender to God. And I think that we hold back. We're so afraid of God. We're like Francis Thompson's Man and the Hound of Heaven. We're running away from God because we think God's going to take everything away from us. And then finally we fall exhausted at his feet and find out God wanted to give us everything, not take it away. So it's a difficult thing, but you have to make the act of surrender to God. You have to turn your life over to God, like the Alcoholics Anonymous and their famous we have 12 steps, of course. But the first step is to realize your powerlessness, ego desperation. You give up on yourself. The second step is to believe in a God who can help you and who wants to help you and who loves you, a kindly, a merciful God. And the third step is turn your life over to that God. Ooh, and that's the hard part, to trust God. And the AAs do it. I used to carry my mother up and down the stairs of our home in Chicago because she had bad arthritis. And my mother was Italian, and she used to grab onto the banister up at every third step. And I would say, Mama, we can't move as long as you're holding onto the banister. And she'd look at me with her soulful little eyes and say, but I'm afraid you'll drop me. And I said, I'm going to drop you right now. When I count to 3, I'm going to drop you and break your back on these stairs if you don't let go. So I go, 1, 2, and then she would let go. And then we'd go down 2 more steps, she would grab on again. And we'd always go through the same dialogue. And once I was thinking how God has us in his arms, and he's taking us to our destiny, and he loves me more than I could love my own little dear mother. But we're holding on to banisters, and we're saying, we're afraid you'll drop me. And God is saying, hey, I love you. I wouldn't drop you. So I think that the whole point is of surrender to God is the key. Now, prayer has been defined as a conversation with God. And that means I speak to God and God speaks to me. But this is the problem. Why doesn't God speak back to me? And you know, this is what I think now. I think that most people in the speaking part of prayer are not being themselves. As long as I put on an act, you can't interact with me, can you? But, oh, my children, you know, and put on an act that's really not me. The falsetto carries through, and you can't interact with an act if I put on an act for you. And if you put on an act for God, you say, oh, Heavenly Father, I am filled with the sweetest sentiments of faith, hope, and charity, when you're really filled with homicidal thoughts. You'd like to kill somebody. How can God interact with you? Because you haven't given him you to interact with. Now, they say that the first obstacle to real prayer is not between you and God, but within you and me. And the real obstacle is I can't tell God what I'm not telling myself. So the real thing I would think, the real part of making prayer successful is to be very honest with God. Martin Luther wrote 10 laws for successful prayer. The first law was, don't lie to God. How do you lie to God? By lying to yourself. So I think what I do when I pray, and I do pray every day, but my life is kind of a prayer. I talk to Jesus most of the day. But when I do pray formally, I try to tell God who I really am. How I feel physically, how I feel mentally, what I've been worried about most in the last 24 hours, who the most important person was in my life at that moment. And I try to tell God everything that describes me as best I know myself. This is who I think I am. And then listen to God. Now, I think we have 5 antennae. We have the mind, the will, the emotions, the imagination, and the memory. And God can come to us. And God will speak to us if we are willing to make that surrender, that total surrender to God, to really tell him who we are, and to really be willing to listen to God as he speaks to us. So in conclusion, here's Loretta Brady now with an exercise in prayer that you will enjoy, I'm sure.
If you might remember, in one of the earliest segments, we spent time together, and I gave you an opportunity to relax and go into a meditative place for yourself and get in touch with who you are. And so I'd like to do something like that again, is to give you an opportunity to quiet down and to leave the brightness and the here and now and the noise and so forth, and just get a chance to be quiet and go within yourself and perhaps be able to communicate with God. That we never know whether we're making that connection sometimes. We can't say we're going to before we do. But this is an opportunity to maybe give you a chance to make a connection of some kind in a spiritual way with God. At the very least, it will be a chance to relax and reflect on the spiritual aspect within your life, and how all of what we've talked about feeds into the spiritual, and how the spiritual feeds into all of what we've talked about. So if you would just relax and maybe uncross your legs and hands, whatever feels comfortable to you. And close your eyes. And if you would start by taking, let me explain this first, some long, slow, deep breaths all the way in and all the way out. And when you do, just don't force it and don't push, just very relaxingly draw air in. A long, slow, deep breath all the way, all the way, all the way in. And fill your body with new, fresh air. And then just very relaxingly exhale and let that air come all the way out. As you exhale, say the word relax to yourself. Another long, slow, deep breath all the way in. and all the way out. And as the air fills your body and the oxygen fills your blood and gives you a sense of calmness and relaxation, just enjoy that feeling. Say the word relax to yourself. This is a good time just to relax. Do nothing, say nothing. Just be. Just appreciate being. And as you become more relaxed and gradually enjoy that feeling more and more, I'd like to ask you to follow me in an imagination. First, imagine yourself about to enter and starting to enter a forest, a beautiful, beautiful forest of trees. You begin to walk along the path through the forest. You have nothing to do but enjoy this. Enjoy the crunch underneath your feet. And the birds, whatever birds you can hear, enjoy the sound of that. And the smell of the different woods in this particular forest. Take it all in with all your senses, your eyes, your ears, the sense of touch even, if you want to reach out and touch something, the sense of smell. As you continue down this path, as you look ahead, you'll begin to see light in the distance. Not a bright light, but the light of an opening. But the woods are going to thin out gradually. You continue to walk on the path toward that lighted area. And when you get there, what you'll find is an opening, a wide opening, a prairie. Beautiful, beautiful prairie filled with grass and flowers. Lovely. Just walk across the prairie and enjoy that. And as you walk through the prairie, you see a hill at the other end, a slow, soft, graceful hill. And when you get to that, you just begin gradually, slowly, effortlessly to climb this hill. When you reach the top of that hill, you'll see something you didn't notice before, that there's a beautiful white house on top of that hill. It's just beautiful. It's just the way you would build a beautiful white house. So go toward it. Go up to the door. There's no one home. It's all there for you to enjoy. Just walk in and you'll find a beautiful home inside. Again, it's just the way you would decorate this home. Just enjoy all the sights and sounds. Over at one side, you'll see a little alcove area, and walk toward that area. And as you actually find yourself in the alcove, suddenly you will feel a very warm, loving presence. Perhaps for you, this is the presence of God. Just enjoy basking in this blessed presence. And also begin to converse with God. Ask a question. Tell God something special you'd like to say. Spend a moment or two in conversation and dialogue with God. Can't stay long. You'll have to go soon. So it's time to say farewell. Farewell, but you will be back anytime you want to return to this place, this lovely alcove place where you can feel the presence of God and be with God and converse with God. Anytime you want to come back here, you can. But for now, it's time to say farewell. After your farewell, just slowly, calmly, peacefully, joyfully walk back through the house and out the door. Slowly descend the hill. Walk across the prairie again. Enjoy it as you did before. And now begin to enter the woods. And as you walk along that familiar path once more, take the time as you're walking to recall the experience that you just had. Recall it. Remember it. What was said, how you felt, what you heard, what it meant to you. You will be able to go back and re-experience some of that again whenever you want to. But you now have an experience that you can keep forever. It's part of you. It won't fade. As you continue along the path, you become more aware of your own body, your own breathing, and you begin to sense that you're no longer in the woods of our imagination, but that you are in the here and now, and that we're all together again in this space. When you feel comfortable, open your eyes. I hope that experience was positive for you and that you will be sharing in some way the same kind of experience in the future. In our last and final segment, John will be giving a summary. We won't have an exercise. He's going to bring together all the various ideas that we were associating with happiness as an inside job. And so stay tuned. We'll be back. Thank you.